Hi, I'm Leanne Brown, and this is Love, Peace, Truth, Karma podcast. Today is my guest is Alisha, and she has an amazing product. You're going to love this story. It just shows how it's so important when a mother's intuition kicks in. Do listen to it and fight for what you believe in. Enjoy the podcast.
If you're in China, you just know it's corrupt. They want it to be like that here.
People are pretending to be 12-year-old kids, mate, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're 40-year-old men.
Now we're getting bombarded with all these death numbers, but there's no context there.
He'd got one child pregnant, he'd raped many others, and we had evidence to prove that.
Do you think evil still exists today as it did back then? And the answer should very simply be yes.
Alisha, thank you so much for coming on. We've been brought together again by divine intervention. It seems to be happening a lot.
Yeah.
To get your story out, and you have got an incredible story from where you are now and the product that you've created, and all the difficulties that you've faced with your little girl. So we'll go way back in the beginning.
Sure.
You know, from when you had your little girl who was premature, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So yeah, I'll let you.
Sure. So I'm a mum of three. So Millie came along. She was a little bit early, so she was induced at 32 weeks. Unfortunately, I had cholestasis in pregnancy, so itchy skin and no one really knowing what was going on, and all your bile acids going crazy in your body just due to your liver. So as I said, she was induced a little bit early. And when she was induced, even though she was premature and she was a little bit on the smaller side, she was actually okay. But they obviously whisked her off to special care, and then all our problems began. So yeah, unfortunately, she was in there for quite a while, and she just didn't seem to be getting better. Every time I was questioning, why isn't she getting better? She wasn't sick when she came in. She was premature, but she wasn't ill. It was me that was ill, and they couldn't answer the question every time. And every day she was getting sicker, and they were giving her more and more drugs, and they were getting sort of more and more angry with me, the questions that I was asking to them. Yeah. It was,
And
even
that's so difficult for a first-time mum, isn't it? Like, to be questioned like that, and it's a mother's intuition, isn't it? When you
Absolutely.
sort of think, why is this happening?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, because obviously I'd had Alfie previous to Millie, so there was quite a small age gap there. There was about 16 months, I think there was. So I'd kind of been there, done that. He was also a little bit poorly when he was born. Don't have much luck there. But yeah, it just seemed to be this whole new territory with Millie, unfortunately. And as I said, every time I was asking, I was getting sort of pushed away further and further, go back up to the sort of maternity ward. You don't need to be down here all the time. They were calling my partner saying, we don't think she's very well. Maybe she's having a bad time.
This is something that's come up so much, when people are questioning, even the narrative that's going on now as well.
Absolutely.
If you're questioning something that is wanting to be the outside what they want you to believe, you're branded crazy. Or, you need a psychiatrist. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's just mind-blowing, isn't it? How easy they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, before you know it, I had like the sister on the ward coming asking if I needed a little bit of support, if I needed some medication, did I need a sleeping tablet, was I feeling anxious? And this sounds terrible, but I wasn't feeling anxious about Millie. I was feeling anxious about what was going on down there. And the more and more I was asking, as I said, the more and more cross they were getting.
Could you go back and forth at any time, like into the special care, like it was free for you to do that?
Yeah, but it's kind of like they knew I was coming. And I don't know if this sounds like I'm being paranoid, but the phone would go, you have to get entry into the ward. They'd make you wait ages. You'd see curtains around in like the Bay 1 where she was, which was quite serious, like the serious area. And then they sort of work their way out of the SCABU unit. And I don't know, it just always felt like I was waiting at that door far too long to be let in to see my baby. And you didn't have a pass to get in or anything. And it's just really, really strange. And it's sorry to stop you there, just going back to like the present moment and how that people women are going into hospital and having the babies taken away and then threatened to be tested against their will and no access to them. And it's crazy when you go into that hospital, it's almost like you give away your right to have access to your baby, like 24/7, and that's
It's actually disgusting.
I mean, at that point, she was a baby. She didn't have a birth certificate. She wasn't registered to me, to the government, to nobody. So what gave them that right to block me access in there? And if I did want to know what was going on, or why the door was closed, or why I couldn't be involved in that nurse conversation or doctor's conversation, I was crazy. And why am I crazy for wanting to know? But I think the more and more I was getting angry with them, the more and they were then starting to actually let off. And the treatment then started to wind down. And all of a sudden, she wasn't sick. Within 4 hours, it was sort of, she's really poorly, she's really sick, you need to go away and we're going to do treatment. To then coming back and miraculously, we're going to move her into another bay tomorrow if she behaves, as they said.
Behaves as a baby.
And that was always, it's if she behaves, if they're good, they're going to fight it and they're going to be better. But the word was always if she behaves. Like
that would
they were a naughty puppy almost.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, eventually after being called crazy and sent off nearly to the loony bin, as they say in there, and the medications and everything like that, they were trying to give to me, but I knew I wasn't ill. I just wanted to have a question. I'm quite inquisitive. I want to know, and that's my baby. I want to know what you're doing to her and why. So yeah, we eventually got out of that hospital.
And how old was she at this point?
She was nearly 5 weeks.
Okay.
So we spent 5 weeks in hospital at that point. They let her go, and I never had a midwife come back out to me. I never had a health visitor, no one. It was like, off you go, you've kind of annoyed us a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah. Really strange. Bearing in mind she was so sick, there was no checkups, nothing, on you go sort of thing.
How did you feel about that?
To be totally honest, at that point, I wanted them to leave me alone. I'd had enough. I'd had enough of them prodding, poking her. This poor tiny baby was covered in bruises from her feet to her head almost, from the CPAP machines. And as I said, they were almost making her, how I feel was making her ill. And there was this one nurse, Scaboo nurse that we had, and there was always a big problem when she was on shift. It was always a big sort of emergency. Something serious was going on with Millie, pressing the buttons, getting more medications. You'll have to stand outside. It was just strange now I think back. So as I said, we obviously then left the hospital, and Lee, my partner, was working overseas at that point. And I'd had enough of being here, if that makes sense. I'd had enough of everyone in my face, and I just needed some time with my baby and my other baby as well. Yeah. So we went over to Holland because that's where he was working. And we'd been out, he was working, I had the babies with me. And Millie hadn't been right for a few days, but she was a new baby. It was different climate, and it just, they get niggly, don't they?
And been through a lot in the first few weeks of
life. So at this point, she was about 3 months old at this point. And so as I said, we were driving back to Lee's sort of works accommodation, and we went under this tunnel way. And I came out, and she was making like a coughing, spluttering noise. And I looked, and she was in the passenger seat in her baby seat, and her eyes were rolling, and she was just covered in blood. This blood was just coming from everywhere. I didn't know what to do, and Alfie was like chatting in the way in the back, and I pulled over. I didn't know even where I was. I didn't even know what the emergency service number was. I think I pulled over that sort of crazily, that people stopped behind, and I was out the car and I was screaming. I just didn't know what to do. So eventually somebody must have called some form of paramedics, emergency services, and the road was closed, and police were there, ambulances there, and there was an air ambulance there within about an hour of it all. It was all happening so quick, and someone was on the phone to Lee telling him to come from site and meet us at this hospital. And I mean, now I think back, I'm in a different country, not speaking my language. I then go and leave Alfie, who's 2.5 at that point.
Wow.
He's about 2 at that point, with police, and I get whisked off to this hospital with Millie.
Would they not allow you to bring Alfie in the...
No, Millie was so sick. We were put into an ambulance and removed out of the ambulance and put into an air ambulance and taken to Den Haag Hospital.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, we were taken there, and it's still, I can't really piece all of it together.
Gosh, I can't even imagine having to, like, the thought of like having to leave one child and go with it.
But I don't even remember doing it.
Yeah,
I know that sounds insane, but I just don't remember.
No.
It all happened so quick, and people were shouting and screaming and
In a different language as well.
in a different language. And my car was just on the side of the road, which the police obviously took and we collected later on after it all. But so we were taken to this hospital, and they were asking all the questions about her, how old she was, has she had any problems? And I explained she was born a little bit early and she needed a little bit of support, and she'd had a few different infections, but no, she's fine. Has she been okay? I said, well, she's been a bit grizzly. She's not been 100%, but I've never really had her 100% because, as I said, she's always been prodded and poked. Okay, so they x-rayed her literally top to bottom, and the poor girl had a hole in her lung. So she'd unfortunately been drowning in her own milk and saliva and everything for all of that period of time. It was I say a hole, it was a tear in her lung, which eventually we found had been caused by when she was in the hospital. She was obviously fed IV fluids and antibiotics, and I never knew what any of these were for because I wasn't allowed to question. I was never given true answers what was going on. And it basically caused an inflation, causing the tear in her lung. So she was, let's say, stitched up, repaired with along the lines of a cow placenta, in fact, because it was a natural protein to tear within her body. It was a trial medication, and she went on some trial drugs for quite a while. And she got better. She was never fully better. She always had problems with her lungs. She was always tired. She went through all the stages of life, and no one still could give an answer why or this had happened. And we went over to then Australia, and poor Millie gets sick again. And she was toddling at that point. So she was about 18 months old, and she just woke up with a limp. And now my mum always says you should put children in Clark's shoes. They should be in proper shoes and all of
my
this.
mum was the same, yeah.
Always. So we, and I was like, I've put her in these bloody
your feet measured and
Converse.
everything, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd put her in these cute little Converse trainers that I'd got for
That was the same with my girls, yeah.
So
as long as they look nice,
yeah, you'll be fine. So I put her in these Converse, and I thought, bloody hell, my mum's right. Put her in Converse and not squeaky Clarks, and she's limping. And as the day got on, she was limping more and more, and she had a nappy on, and I thought, oh God, she's got a red mark there. The nappy must be a bit tight, and we just got to obviously Australia, so it was different nappies. Could it be the nappy that was getting red on her? I'll whip the nappy off, sort of thing. And the limp was getting worse and worse. And Alfie was a little bit boisterous, he's a boy, he's like 4 at that point. So there's a bit rough and tumble with them, and I thought, I wonder if they've like knocked each other or she's knocked herself, because this was sort of 3 days later now and she's still limping. I thought I'm going to have to take her to the hospital and get her, just checked, if anything, to make sure she's not hurt herself. So when we get to the hospital, Lee comes along with me as well, and a full family event to this hospital. And I just said, look, I'm not really quite sure what's going on. She's got this little bit of a red mark, which at that point had kind of turned into a bit of a bruise. She hasn't knocked herself that I'm aware of. Obviously, I've got Alfie. I don't know if they've had a little bit of a play and she's hurt. Or it could be her shoes. I really don't know what it is. And then they examined her, and there was a few more little bruises around just sort of her hip area and her bum. Obviously, she's up and down. You know how they are when they're starting to find their feet. They've got bumps and lumps and bruises everywhere. We were pulled aside again, being crazy lady. We were pulled aside separately, in fact, and was asked. I'm shaking because I was asked if we'd hurt her, if I'd hurt her, or how was the family situation. I think the question was there any violence or anything like that, which I think they do that in the NHS here. They ask if you've got any abuse, are you okay? Yeah. But we were pulled away because they couldn't find an answer again why she was limping. She'd had x-rays and things at that point. And then we were pulled away, and no, there's nothing come back on the x-ray. How's the family situation? Obviously, you've moved. It's stressful. Is everyone okay? It's horrible. Yeah. And I was like, look, there's something not right with her still, because she was just not. She just wasn't comfortable. And I know your X-rays are saying fine. There's no abuse in our house, like absolutely not whatsoever. So what could it be? Oh, we'll do some blood tests. And then the blood test came back because the markers were quite high for bone and blood cancer. So we had quite an intense, she was admitted at that point, and we had quite an intense, probably about 2 weeks waiting for these results. And she'd had bone scans, full body scans, everything was going on. This poor child was jabbed from head to toe again. Oh. And they couldn't find the answer again, what was going on. And there was a little boy in the bed opposite that had this thing called osteomyelitis, which was a bone infection. And he had it in his finger. And unfortunately, he was going to have his finger amputated, and that's why he was in the hospital. And the signs were very similar to Millie. We'd had the results actually on that morning that the bone cancer and blood cancer was officially clear. But the signs of what Millie had and what this little boy had with the osteomyelitis was very similar. So I requested another scan and I was told I was crazy. We've done it all. You don't need to be asking. We're doctors. Again, I seem to have a bit of a trait for being called crazy every time I'm questioning somebody.
But thank God you do. Thank God you did.
Yeah, because they had no answer. And I mean, at that point, it was, we're not quite sure. There's an infection of some form. We'll leave it be and see how you go. Yeah, obviously the little boy had been left a little bit too long. So I said, well, what do you have to do to be tested like the boy over there sort of thing? Like, obviously that's quite similar. He had the pain and obviously he wasn't limping because it was in his finger. But when I was talking to his mum and his dad and his grandmother, it was so similar to the temperatures, the blotching, the bruising, and different things, obviously, but in different part of the body. Anyway, they did this extra, I think it was an MRI scan they actually did, and on her hips, and it didn't actually get tested or checked there. It got sent crazily all the way in the world, but from Australia in Melbourne all the way to a hospital in Oswestry, Gabowen, which is now I know is the world's basically best for bones and figuring out what's going on.
Where's that?
In Gabowen in Oswestry.
Where's that?
It's like North Wales, Shropshire way.
I thought it sounded like a Welsh place.
Yeah. So it's not, it's not even far away. And I'm actually from probably about 5 minutes away from where that hospital was, and all the places of the world, her results were sent there.
Yeah, because you were saying Australia's quite far behind in medical.
So far behind, and I think it was about 10, 11 years behind on their medical treatments and pathway plans compared to obviously what we do here, even though I moan about here as well. And then, so it was about 7 days later, and again, another 7 days, we then got these test results back, which came back, and they then diagnosed her with osteomyelitis. Now,
so you were right all along.
I was right, yeah. The lines aligned, and I knew there was something similar to this little boy. And
did they apologise?
No, definitely not. I was crazy again, crazy. And yeah, so that she was then, there was no treatment pathway for them, and they were concerned that this bug was basically going to keep growing into different parts of her body. So it was on the growth plate of her right hip, and their suggestion was amputation. They must like doing that in Australia. It must be the easiest way of stopping something. But that still didn't guarantee that it wasn't going to go anywhere else. So we asked if we could have sort of like a second opinion, because she's our baby, she's been through a lot, and she was fine a few weeks ago, like a month ago at this point, she was fine. And now you want to amputate a leg because you don't have a medication for her. She's not in pain. We're just here because we've been waiting for the results. And they didn't like that I asked for the second opinion, but we sort of took it upon ourselves to actually ring the hospital in the UK. And we said, look, you've actually had the results. I don't know if you can speak to us. And we were actually sort of put through to the secretary of the doctor. And then he called me back the next day and he was absolutely outraged. He's like, what on earth do you mean? He's like, I've had this note from my secretary. She said in regards to amputation, this is just a treatment plan of every 6 months, x-rays, come back, like, don't let them do this. So I had to sign out of the hospital. Wow. And signing out of the hospital then brought like a board of the hospital along, the head of the children's ward, a psychiatrist, and even the chaplain of the hospital as well, which was all a bit strange, to make sure I was doing the right thing. I was like, look, we're leaving Australia. I'm going to go back. We're going to do what's suggested of the people that have given you this diagnosis, because you didn't give it, they give it to you.
Yeah.
So we packed everything up. I mean, obviously discharging her out of hospital, she was well. She was just limping, she wasn't in pain. She just had this limp, and the temperature had gone by that point because she'd had some antibiotics. And so we took a flight back from Australia. And we were on a Singapore Airlines, and obviously it's a long flight, so you have a stopover, Singapore or Dubai normally. And we stopped we were pretty much glad we were stopping because she turned very, very sick on the flight. And it wasn't to do with the osteomyelitis. She basically stopped breathing, and they took over seats on the aircraft. And again, a really patchy, strange time where you can remember it, but you can't really remember it when I'm talking about it now. And she had they brought some oxygen over, and she was almost gasping for air again. And it kind of flashed back to when we were in Holland. It was very similar. I mean, this time there was no blood. It wasn't as gruesome, but she was gasping. She just couldn't breathe at all.
Do you think it had anything to do with the altitude then?
I don't know, because obviously we'd gone over there on the flight and it was fine. I don't know if she'd been having obviously a bit of a rough time with this osteomyelitis, and there's something therefore had triggered, and going on the flight and the altitude potentially, could have affected something, especially because it was obviously respiratory then. So when we obviously then were grounded in Singapore, and Singapore were absolutely fantastic. The airport, everybody was amazing. It's probably the best healthcare Millie's ever received.
That's super advanced, I would
super
assume.
advanced, so clean, and everyone knew what they were doing. There was no. It's stressful when your kid's sick, no matter if it's a tummy bug or they're in hospital. But it was like everyone knew what they had to do in certain eventualities and reasons, and they had their steps in plan. And it was just a much smoother way of your kid being sick, as awful as that sounds. So they kind of took over full care. We were in Singapore. They were giving her lots of different things, like basically like salts, and within the oxygen she was having it in. She was having some salts through there, steroids. She was being even fed like bone broths and soups because they thought it was to do like with the osteomyelitis, so fattening up the bones and the tissues around, and trying to make her obviously like chicken soup, I guess. When you feel ill, your mum or your nan gets chicken soup, and apparently the world is fixed with that. But they were using a lot more different remedies, methods, treatments. Massage as well was really quite key, what they were giving her over there to get this mucus up and the pain that she potentially was having in her hip, because she was so small she couldn't really tell anyone. And so she did get obviously better there. The reason was she had an infection in her lungs again. So after about a week, we then came back to the UK. She was well enough to fly, and we came back to the UK. And when we came back into Manchester, we had a choice to be taken straight to Alder Hey Hospital or to go home and go to our nearest hospital, sort of thing. So we did actually take the choice to go home because she was well enough. You know, she just had a rough few days and she needed to rest. But there still was something that was niggling. It just wasn't right. You know, she'd been patched up in Holland. She was on her way there. She was having treatment for that. She'd had osteomyelitis. She was being treated for that and being monitored for that. But there was just something that no one was saying what was actually ever wrong with her. So I asked for a referral to the Alder Hey Hospital for the respiratory team. And about that time, it was probably about 6 months, unfortunately, I had to wait. And about that time, there was press starting to come out in regards to hospitals with SCABU cares and nurses not being so great with the special care babies. And I was thinking, God, it's absolutely terrible. I've been there, done that sort of twice with 2 babies. How can they do this? Yeah. You know, nurses and doctors do this. And this was another hospital trust at that point anyway. And Millie went through some care in Alder Hey, and she was having PICC lines fitted every 12 weeks. They'd go in for 2 weeks, so it'd be routed through her arm into her chest. A nurse would come out every day, and still to this day, in fact, I don't even know what drugs were pumped into her, but I was told that was the only way of keeping her sort of healthy and to stop the nosebleeds, the headaches, and to stop her breathing.
Isn't it mind-blowing that, like, you aren't able to be informed about what they're actually pumping into your child? Yeah. And, you know, obviously when I've spoke to other people in podcasts for the likes of Sophie, they've, you know, and she had the tumour in her pancreas and it was removed, and it was only down to her research, which obviously is what you've done, that made her better. And if she was willing to just accept, you know, what the doctors and nurses just told her and give her, then she potentially wouldn't have been here.
No.
And that is just so frightening, because the majority of people just do that, don't they?
Well, you feel you're grown up to trust your teacher,
Authority.
the policeman.
Yeah.
Respect your head teacher,
Yeah.
respect your elders, never question the doctor. They've been to university for 7 years, and it's not being rude question. We're inquisitive. We're allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, exactly.
We're
There's always an
allowed.
alternative.
Absolutely.
And science, trust the science.
Yeah.
They're forever evolving, let's face it.
Exactly. And this is what I found is that, every time I was being asked questions, and we've been going a few years here now, I was always made out to be the crazy one and stop asking questions. You need to shush in the corner and come back in 2 weeks, and we'll put the PICC line in, and we'll all pin her to the bed and we'll throw it in, because that's the only way that she's going to be well, if you like. And I started doing a bit of research. So I went back to sort of the time, if you like, in Singapore and what they were doing in regards to the bone broth, a bit more natural,
Yeah.
The bone broth, the massage. So we started to make bone broth, which, if anyone's ever done it, absolutely stinks the house out. It's totally gross. And we were cooking all these carcasses down, but it was like I've
actually done it like once before, and I tried to get the kids on it, but they weren't having it at all.
It's super stinky. It really, really is. But
it kind of just tastes like chicken soup, though, I feel like, doesn't it? It's
Yeah,
like a bit watered down chicken soup.
it's when it sets.
Yeah, it's like jelly-fied, yeah.
Yeah, and all the different colours, and trying to get a baby to eat that.
Yeah.
It was not great. I started doing a bit of research, as I said, and we started to make our version of Singapore care in regards to like the massages and the salt cave therapy. And there was a place in Liverpool actually that we used to come to and have this salt cave treatment. And it
What's
was
that?
brilliant. Salt caves. So it's I don't know how to explain it, but unfortunately they've closed down. I've been out of the UK for a little while, and I did have a look to see if we could go again and start doing it, but it's a small room, and it is literally like a salt cave. They bring in the salts and they have crystals in there, and the kids play and do colouring.
So is it like quite a clammy environment? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that I've been into a spa and they've had like a salt cave. Yeah, so it'd be like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
was it?
and it was. I found it was really good because we used to go to the salt cave, and don't get me wrong, that night after we'd been into the salt cave, so we'd been in the morning, that night was absolute hell on earth. All she would do is cough all night. It was like she was bringing it all up. She'd be playing with like the crystals in there and the salts, and I think it was just breaking all the crap inside of her out. And I said that night was hell, but then after that I used to get a few good nights sleep.
Okay.
Because she was kind of had a good clear out of all this mucus off her lungs. So we were doing these different sort of remedies, techniques, and the hospital were absolutely furious about it. Apparently it was interfering with their pathway.
Really?
Yeah. Even like the things
On what
like
basis?
well, even the
She was
swimming.
getting better.
Yeah. Even the swimming and the massage. I mean, they showed me how to do some like physio massage, and it was so rough. I mean, like you could literally be bruising her. So I felt really uncomfortable with doing that. So we used like I mean, everyone's using rollers now, but we were using like little rollers on it, or even, she didn't like that. So like little Play-Doh rollers. I know it sounds so weird, but they were bumpy and it was similar and it was small and it wasn't as scary to a small child. So we're using those on her, bone broths. We had a friend who has a nutrition company in Benelux in Belgium, and he was making some vitamin C liposol for us. Nothing fancy in big bottles, really gloopy, no flavourings in it or nothing, just as raw as it comes. And she was having this bone broth. And then I found an inhaler. And I'd been doing research between sort of Singapore and the US. That was where the Singapore side of it was a lot of the alternative medicines as well. And the US was not more intrusive, but actually had a sort of, here's your problem and this is what can fix it. And I suggested this, it was a simple inhaler. I suggested it to Alder Hay, to the doctor, to the asthma nurse, the respiratory team. No, we can't give you, it's too expensive. It was £110, I found out the inhaler was. Bearing in mind, when she goes to theatre every 12 weeks to have these PICC lines put in, or she ripped them out, we had to do it again, that's costing a lot more money, but they just wouldn't give her this inhaler. So I actually got a doctor in Holland to prescribe it for us over there. It was Skype. We did it over Skype, and he prescribed it and sent this first one. and I rejected one of the next PICC lines. And again, I was called by the doctor's secretary, asked if I could come in, and there was 4 people in this room in Alder Hay. And if I take her off the treatment pathway, they'd have to refer it to social services. And
Wow.
do you really want that? And I said, well, we've got to try something else, haven't we? You know, she was starting school then. You're coming into school, you're being invasive in her life. She can't have this forever. There's got to be something else. So let's try this inhaler.
And if it's not working, it wasn't
working.
Yeah.
It would work. The PICC line would work for about 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks with whatever it was that she was being pumped into. But after that, there was that gap from like week 3 to week 12 where she was
Just the same.
ill.
Yeah.
Like she couldn't go up the stairs without having a nosebleed. She was coughing.
Wow.
Obviously, at that point, then we were like, right, we're going to try it. Okay, if I'm crazy lady again for like the 3rd or 4th time, I'll deal with that for a little while. Send everyone round and
Bless you.
I'm going to find
gosh.
something else. Like, let's
Yeah.
have a go at this. So we, as I said, we took her off the PICC line. We started this inhaler and it did start to work. There were still little things that weren't, you know, wasn't perfect. But so I went back to the consultant in Alder Hay and I said, this is much better. You know, we're much better. We're much happier. She's not covered in bruises. She's not being prodded and poked and she's having a bit more of a normal life. What else do you think I need to do? Well, he said the only thing I can suggest is living in like a microclimate, going somewhere where it's warm so it's not as harsh on her, and she can sort of breathe, if you like, without having this coughs and colds, which is affecting the respiratory all the time. So, okay, perfect. I literally went home. Lee was offshore on a rig and I called him. Well, he called me and I said, look, I'm actually packing the house as we speak. We're going to Barcelona. I found it's microclimate. So we're off. So he got off the rig 6 days later. And as quick as that, we were actually on our way to Barcelona because I was like, right, someone's telling me that it's going to work. She's going to be better. She's going to be happier and healthier. This has got to be worth it. And I mean, there could be worse places in the world to live than Barcelona.
Yeah.
So we went over and probably within about 3 weeks, she'd stopped using her nebulizer at bedtime. She'd come off, she was on 40 milligrams, 45 milligrams a day of steroids as well, which is so intrusive for a baby.
Yeah.
That's going to cause problems
Yeah.
for her bones and growth and everything. We'd come off that, we'd come off the inhaler. We basically stopped massaging. It was kind of like I didn't obviously have to do anything for her health-wise. She seemed to repair
Yeah.
like a flower.
Yeah.
She was in the sunlight and she was literally blossoming. She was super, super
Vitamin
happy.
D, yeah,
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
important.
And I think she'd just stopped being prodded and poked.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you're ill, my mum says, get up off the... My mum's got lupus, so that's kind of like an invisible illness. You don't know. Everyone looks on the outside and thinks she's fine because she's not in a wheelchair or, you know, she's not in hospital. But it's an autoimmune disease. And with that, I think when people are prodding and poking you, poor Millie was probably feeling ill and maybe really she actually wasn't ill.
Yeah, because
If that makes
obviously it's
sense.
the mind, isn't it? If
Absolutely.
you're in that environment and you're going in and out of hospital and people are doing that, then
Yeah.
you automatically, I suppose it's what all she's known as well, isn't it? From being such...
So she was kind of like the sick kid, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. No one really knew in nursery, in school, no one in the play group, no one really knew her, but the sick kid with a nurse that would come in every few weeks and give her the drugs and off they go sort of thing. So I think she, as I said, she just really flourished when we got to Barcelona within a few weeks. We were still doing like the vitamin C liposol that she was taking. She was still having like the bone broth. We had another bit of a formula, if you like, that a friend, not around a kitchen table or anything, that within a lab in France, they were making for us, and another liquid technology, which pretty much saved her and helped her repair, really. And while we were over there was another article that came out, and I'd been getting contacted all the time from a private number, and I thought, to be totally honest with you, I thought it was the hospital, like, where have you gone? Why aren't you coming? I just needed to be left alone. I'd had enough of people prodding and poking and not fixing her, you know. It wasn't, she was ill. She didn't need someone there, but I needed to be also left alone with her. And there was brilliant hospitals there. Should anything have gone obviously wrong, of course, I would have taken her.
Yeah.
I just thought it was the hospital because they always call you on a withheld, and I left it. And then I'd happened to, I think it was on a Facebook, in fact, like a local Chester page. There was a nurse, a special care nurse that had been brought in for questioning for the attempted and murders of babies in the Countess Hospital. And I was like, I recognise her. I really recognise her.
Oh, gosh.
I was like, no. Then I looked at the years. I was like, no, I recognise her. You were the one that every time I was asking what was going on, you were like, crazy lady in it, out of here, wait outside the door, shush, go away, I'm doing my job. You want her to get better. Is she going to be a good baby? I can remember saying at the start of a shift, is she going to be a good baby or a naughty baby today?
Oh my God, I feel sick for you. Like, what was going through your head at this point?
I hadn't put them still together at that point because I thought, well, no one's contacted me. She mustn't have been harmed or anything like that, you know. And then Millie was so well, I didn't want to think about what had happened here, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'd felt quite like sort of let down with my personal health, if you like, via, unfortunately. Obviously, the NHS is brilliant, but there is certain parts of it that let you down along the way. And I'd had to receive private treatment and put myself into debt at an early age to get better myself. And I kind of wanted to be just left alone. I wanted to figure it out.
And like we're saying, like obviously we're hearing from you now, there is some incredible nurses that are in it for the reason, like the right reasons, but then you get the odd one like this evil
though, isn't it?
Nurse, that's just not right in the head, not normal.
No.
Yeah.
And so it was there in my mind, but then I thought, no, God, no, nothing could have ever happened. Like, she was just sick. That was it. I was told she was sick and she got better and okay, she's got these lung problems. We then, Lee got another job offer in Belgium and we decided to go sort of back over all together and leave Barcelona and go. So we went all back over. I just wasn't sitting right. There was something still, it was about a year later at that point, and it's just something still wasn't, I needed to understand in regards to this, was Millie a part of this sort of case, if you like, or was she affected? Was her lung problem to do with her? And looking in regards to that nurse, I started to dig in a little bit more and deeper. And I could see, obviously, in regards to what she'd been doing with the babies was in regards to IV, giving more of the IV fluids, giving more of the antibiotics, and they should have been kind of making them sick.
Yeah.
And I thought, well,
overdosing them.
Yeah. And obviously that's what had happened with Millie. She wasn't overdosed, but she was to a point, therefore, with her lungs that they'd had so much pressure and the IV was either placed incorrectly or given too much fluid for that tiny baby that had caused that sort of backfill, if you like, in the lung area, giving Millie all of her problems that she'd received, if you like, for all those years. So I got in contact with the hospital, with the Countess, and I said out sort of my concerns, and she was a baby, she was an inpatient for this time, and I've seen the press, and there was a separate call line, a separate line number. The hospital trust weren't dealing with it at that point. So I contacted those, and I didn't hear back from them.
At all?
No.
Shocking. Absolutely shocking.
No, I called them probably twice, in fact, and never ever heard back from them.
And did you not take it any further?
Well, we did, and we didn't. And we took it to a point where, again, I was basically told that I'm blaming other people for what had happened to her when it was just unfortunate what had happened to Millie, and I shouldn't be blaming this nurse, basically.
Wow.
Maybe they just didn't want any more caseload.
Yeah.
Because they had enough to deal with, obviously, babies that had been murdered and injured from her, and maybe they just weren't interested in a bigger caseload. So obviously, you know, still to this day, I can't point a finger and say that happened, but it was in that time scale. And Millie
the fact that she was in her care. Millie was in this evil witch's care.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
Yeah. So obviously then, you know, we travelled back to Barcelona then because the weather in Belgium wasn't great for Millie, unfortunately. And we stayed there for a couple of years. And we then started giving her more doses of the stuff we'd been making, and we pulled it together. And we were having dinner with a friend, our Belgian friend at that point, and he'd asked about Millie, and you have a bottle of wine and you start talking and you're saying it's repaired her, she'd had x-rays, the scarring seems to have disappeared, this and this. It's like, why don't you sort of like make it for other people? Obviously the benefits that you've shown within that for arthritis, so Millie with the osteomyelitis is almost classed as like she has arthritis. Millie's lung problem is kind of like she was an 80-year-old smoker, like a COPD.
Wow.
That's how the sort of she's treated, if you like.
Yeah.
Why don't you make, bit of a wacky idea when you've had, a bottle or two of red, but why don't you make that into something for other people? There's so many supplements on the market. There's so many people suffering with invisible problems like the arthritis and COPD or even brain fog, cognitive function. And we kind of left it at that point. And my friend stopped doing his nutrition company and said, I've got somebody else that can make it for you. They normally just do big batches.
So you were literally just doing this concoction yourself,
just for Millie,
all the time.
It wasn't like this crazy lady thing around the kitchen table, like most people with a supplement or something.
Pinch of salt,
yeah, that's it.
To like little witch's
oregano. It was none of that going on. None of that. I haven't got time for any of that. I'm a kind of a Deliveroo kind of person. I'm not going to pretend like I stood around the kitchen island making potions, because I definitely didn't. I was literally going, okay, this research book says this America says this, people are doing this, where's it all together? And we found some different plants. I didn't want to be given as sugars or additives, preservatives. Yeah. So we grew a couple of different ingredients, and which was a bit hocus pocus, but it worked. So anyway, I got passed through to this company in Paris, and they were like, why are you making this? Who's this for? Like, who are you, kind of thing? I was like, desperate mum. This has worked for my kid for quite a few years now. She's like super happy, healthy. She's growing. I was told her growth might be stunted because of the steroids, and it's working. Don't ask me questions, just make it. And
so Millie has completely had a complete turnaround. Due
literally
to
360.
This concoction of this potion.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Obviously, she was still to this day, she has, if it's a cold, she'll get it maybe 3 times worse than you or I or another kid would in a class, and she's quite pale to look at. But I think she's had she's very beautiful, but she's had so many steroids. Her body's been pumped in so many different ways. My mum has steroids as well, and they say like a moon-shaped face with the steroids. I hope you don't watch this. She's very beautiful, but unfortunately that's the damage of taking steroids, is it blows you up in all different ways possible.
She's not on the steroids anymore?
No, we stopped those.
So is she on any medication other than what you're giving her?
No.
Wow.
No inhalers, no treatment, no PICC line. They said that she was going to be on the PICC line until at least she was between 11 and 13, depending on when hormones started, because they didn't know what to do until that point.
And how old is she now?
She is 10.
Okay.
So she's 11 in November. We've been off them now for this medication. We've been trialling, testing for 7 years now.
The one that you've been making?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been doing it on her for 7 years. And we've been off all forms of drugs for 7 years with her.
So this company was like, who are you?
Who are you? What is this? Who is it for? What are you, why? And I was like, oh no, I've got a daughter. She's been really ill. Like, please carry on making it for me. I really need it. And I thought they were going to be like, no, we're not going to make it for you. Like, crazy lady, go to take kid to a doctor sort of thing. Because that's what I normally get told is go and take a real drug, and not us. Because they're a big pharmaceutical company. And world leaders at that. I think they're number 3 in the world of pharmaceuticals. And
pharmaceuticals haven't got a great reputation at the minute.
They really haven't, have they? They've got 2 wings, so they do a lot of things which is collagen is most important, obviously, within the product of what Millie has, the bovine collagen within there. But they have
me some.
I know. They have they have a gelatin company, and then they also have this pharmaceutical wing that lean off them, which they mostly do anyway. Yeah, everything's normally linked to pharmaceuticals, and so they basically said, no, not that we don't want to make it for you. We actually want you to go away and IP this. I guess you've not IP'd it. And I was like, well, no, because I don't even know what the word was, to be totally honest with you, at that point. I had no idea. I was just kind of floating with the world that she was there and that was it, and was totally fine with what she was having. I had no idea what IP was. So I was like, okay, fine. Is that just a way of binning me off so you don't have to do anything? So I went and spoke to someone what IP was and patents and all of that sort of stuff, and signed it, done it, patented it. I was like, I'm back, I've got it. It takes years to get a patent if anyone's doing any of this IP stuff. Yeah, it can take 5-10 years and a lot of cash as well. I've got it, it's gone in, and can you help me now, sort of thing. And you're like, yeah, that's help. We can help you now, but we've never seen a formula like this. And obviously what you're saying is we want to protect you as well. We don't want to, a lot of companies have a bad name, he said, within our industry for people coming out of desperation and then they stealing that idea and they obviously profiteering from it.
That was really nice of them.
It was super, super nice. Yeah. They weren't binning me off for once. No one was saying I was crazy or anything, which was good.
This is refreshing.
Yeah, I know. It was lovely. It was so nice. So the guys sort of set to work, if you like. We had to make a bit bigger samples. It was still called samples because it wasn't a product. It didn't have a name. So they had to make bigger bottles and I had to buy like 1,000 units instead of what my friend had been doing. It was like 100 units for me. So it was quite a big, obviously, cost implication to that because you're buying low quantities, you're not doing MOQs, and it's all on a bench lab sample, as they call it. And so we then carried on doing through, and obviously was seeing the benefits. I was telling friends about benefits. And
what are the benefits then for any of us to take it, for me to take it, or children?
So we've kind of stepped away. So obviously when we were doing it for just Millie, and obviously Millie still has her own, if you like, dosage of it, her own formula of it. Millie's benefits within the one that she had were for her, I was so concerned about cognitive function because she'd been brain fogged for years with all of these drugs, and I was so concerned of, she hadn't done schooling properly, and I was like, oh, you've got to have fish X times a week and all your oils and stuff like that.
Which is then fish, as they say, has got mercury in it. And
exactly, yeah. And then don't have the collagen with the marine collagen because obviously it is an allergen, it's a bigger allergen than the bovine one. But so within Millie's, she has a connective function within that, which is the coenzyme Q10, which we have in our bodies anyway. But we also do need to increase that. Like with any proteins in our body, we also need to keep on top of it. So we have the Q10 in Millie's formula, vitamin C, collagen, vitamin D, B12, and vitamin A. So within her functions, what she gets out of that is a connective function. She gets like a pain relief, and that's from the collagen. So it's the bovine collagen, which collagen protein is the most abundant in the body. Bovine is the closest to our structures. So marine is really popular. If you look at the collagen market, we're not similar to a fish, are we? You know?
Yeah.
So we're similar to a cow with our with our structures.
Yeah.
So that matches up with us and builds on that. So she has the relief where it's growing the extra collagen within her body around her organs, her joints, and obviously that's what she suffers with quite a lot is her joints, previously. And then she also has what I was mentioning before in regards to her skin. Her skin can be quite pale and quite dry. It's very, even though she drinks a lot, and I think that's just been because of, unfortunately, she always needs to be hydrated, and I think that's just due to the respiratory. She's quite dry, if you like. It gives that hydration within her skin, within her body as well. So where we're up to at the moment is that Millie has her own formula, but we were having so many benefits that we then decided to okay, well, this is costing me a lot. Her medication, not medication, but her sort of treatment way, like massages and swimming and stuff, which we choose to do with her because obviously we want the best for her. Costs a lot of money. And we're also still concerned that we don't really know what could happen if she needs treatment or anything later on. So obviously you want to fill the pot up for that point later. So, and everyone was telling us how good it was. So we then decided to make another formula, if you like, for the market and sort of profit back off, if you like, what we've invested in, and it's good, so why can't other people use it? There's lots of supplements out there, diet supplements, health supplements, some that work, some that don't work. So we've made a male formula and a female formula because, again, I think what the supplement market forgets is male and female bodies are different. Even female to female bodies are different. We all need different things. Yeah. So we've tweaked a sort of Millie's recipe, if you like, the original recipe, to something that's for two different categories, male and female. We've also got a vegan blend as well, because obviously we've got bovine collagen within within both of the formulas. I had all this paperwork to say how outstanding it was. We had reviews, clinical trials. We'd done 1 clinical trials, testing, consumer trials as well. And at that point, obviously, there was, well, okay, we're going to commercialise this now. This is not what we planned to do. Okay, I have no idea on how to get money or business plans or anything like that. And then you see these government startup help pots. Oh, there's grants and there's money everywhere, everyone tells you. So I contacted GC Business Finance Business Hub in Manchester. I got the pharmaceutical company to write me a business plan because I didn't know what to do. They told them, in the business plan how amazing it was. They showed pictures of before, after, beginning 20 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so on. And they've written an outstanding review in regards to the products and the formulation that we'd done. We'd IP'd it all. That cost a lot, and obviously. And took it to him, proud as punch with this business plan. Obviously, I hadn't written it, but anyway, so they looked at it and he's like, yeah, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. We've got funding. No problem at all. I'll come back to you. So he didn't come back to me. So I chased him up. He's like, oh, sorry, we didn't come back to you. Yeah, basically, we can't give you the funding because when we see women, obviously, we can see your story within that. I had 3 children at this point now. When women have a business and it's a young family, it's normally as a hobby. So we couldn't give you funding, even though bearing in mind I was going to be paying it back. It was a loan. We can't give you the funding because basically you're a mum. You're a mum of 3. How are you going to have a business?
It's crazy in this day and age.
Yeah. And as I said, I was paying it back. It was me as a person. It wasn't a limited company that you can shut down and run away and never pay it. It was me as a person that was going to pay it back. But I wasn't valuable enough for that loan.
So then COVID hit. And then obviously moving forward, you ended up you just tweaking everything like you said.
Yeah.
And it's ready. Is it ready now to go to market?
We're ready to go to market.
Yeah.
So
and
we've sold everything. We don't need your funding.
Yeah.
We'll prove them that it's a feasible business. So we decided to do the old route of selling everything but the kitchen sink. We did that.
Sounds like you've got an amazing product. And so when does it go to market?
So we are working with a brilliant company called Red Tree. And they are, because I have no idea on how to take this product to market. So they're taking it to market in May of this year. So it's quite exciting. Called? Bit of a strange one, but 0606.
Okay.
And there's a little reason in regards to that.
Go on.
So 6 is a lucky number. 6 is a lucky number. It is quick. And I like to double things up. Don't know why. I like things aligned, like things doubled up. 6 is sort of meaning like, you can continue, you're strong, you're loved, there's a reason to do things.
Yeah.
And throughout the whole time, obviously, there was a reason for Millie, a reason for me to do things because she was loved. I was strong. She wasn't strong. I needed to fight for her.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll leave it for now.
Amazing. So when's it available to buy?
It'll be available from the middle of May.
Middle of May, amazing. And there's going to be a website and everything that we can add that to.
Of course.
Here, can we?
Yeah.
But amazing. Well, what an incredible story. You really have been through it, so many ups and downs, and poor Millie.
I know.
But she's going to have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have called it Millie.
Maybe we should have, yeah.
Because it is all about her, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what an amazing mum you are to fight for her and be able to do that research and not just take the nurse's word for what they were telling you.
And again, it's not obviously going about bad against anyone. There's good and bad out there. But sometimes just
go with your intuition.
Absolutely.
And stick with it and fight for it. Because
and you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Only sometimes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.